Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I'm your host and beat reporter, and I've been your beat reporter covering the Jacksonville Jaguars for On SI every single day since August 2019, and we are here to march through another offseason together. As always, you can always find our 100% free, 24/7 boots on the ground coverage of the Jacksonville Jaguars when you follow us every single day on social media such as Facebook and Twitter at Jaguars on SI. You can also find us at www.si.com/NFL/Jaguars. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. Today we are going to talk about an annual list. Comes out from ESPN the last couple years from Bill Barnwell. Great writer, great analyst. Really have respected his writing for a long time. And he looks at essentially every team's skill position group and ranks them 32 through 1. So what we're going to do today is we are going to look at where you put the Jaguars, but whether we, discuss whether we agree or disagree. And then, what I think is a useful exercise is, are any teams ahead of the Jaguars? Would we take the Jaguar skill group ahead of them? Now, to show you how dead on accurate this list might be, they have the Tennessee Titans at number 32 as the absolute worst skill group in football, and I think that has to be absolutely consensus and agreed upon. We talked about in our preview or review, whatever you want to call it, of the Tennessee Titans, what they have going for them, what they have that isn't working for them, that they have the Will Levis of skill groups, really. They have Calvin Ridley, still solid, 30 years old. Tony Pollard's okay. Otherwise, they don't really have anything. They have Cam Ward's friend from college, I presume. But other than that, not much going on with the Tennessee Titans. So just to give you an idea that things are, all in all, not a bad way to start the list in terms of realism. So they had the Jaguars at number 18. They were at number 16 a year ago, and they were at number 9 the year before. And I get why they were at number 9 in 2023. They had just added Calvin Ridley, who, obviously 2 years younger than he is now, was coming off some time away from football, so the presuming thought was that he'd be energized, well-rested, etc. Christian Kirk just had a career year. Evan Ingram just had a career year. Zay Jones had a career year. But we now know, with the benefit of hindsight, it was a really limited room. Calvin Ridley was a good receiver. Maybe not a alpha male number 1 receiver like the Jaguars needed him to be, but otherwise, you had two guys who fit really specific roles. Kirk, of course, ended up getting hurt, and then Zay Jones, who, I've been on record. I think that he was just kind of just a piece, just another guy in the mix. So he had the Jaguars at 18 this year. Had emphatic phase to Brian Thomas Jr. Was a little more guarded about the potential of Travis Hunter. And I do think he makes some good points. Travis Hunter at Colorado was a lot more athlete, I think, than wide receiver. And I believe that's a big reason why the Jaguars have used Travis Hunter on offense so much. At least at this point. He simply has more to learn on the offensive side of the ball. So obviously a little bit bullish on what he thinks Hunter can provide. He said, that all in all, he few top 5 receiver picks coming to the NFL with a wider range of potential outcomes in year 1. I'm not sure if I'd say a wide range of potential outcomes. I think the floor is still very high for Travis Hunter just because, 1, the scheme. They're going to find ways to get him the ball. He's going to find ways to produce after the catch. And then 2, he's just such a rare athlete with the ball in his hands, the ball skills, etc. Otherwise, didn't have a lot to say, in terms of what the Jaguars have behind them. Noted that De'Ami Brown, obviously, they're looking for him to kind of up the ante from what he did in Washington after a really hot streak at the end of his time there. He said Britton Strange had a respectable 1.6 yards per route run. Maybe he'll be able to do the same that he did with Bucky Irving this year with another fourth-round pick in Bashal Tuden. But overall, it seems like, he's thinks the Jaguar skill group is solid, but it looks like he wants to see more from Hunter. So that means there are 17 skill groups ahead of the Jaguars. And we're going to go through them and say which ones we would actually take the Jaguars over. Number 17 is the Green Bay Packers. I would take the Jaguar skill group over the Packers because I think the Packers have a lot of number 2, even some number 3 receivers. They have a deeper receiver room than the Jaguars, but I think Brian Thomas Jr. is several. And I am emphatic on several tiers better than the best Packers weapon. Josh Jacobs is a good back. Is he a game-changing running back? I'm not sure. I think maybe only Saquon and Henry are right now. But he's a good running back. Tight end, Luke Musgrave really hasn't done much. Obviously, they added Matthew Golden in the draft, but if you're taking rookie receivers into account, I think that obviously Travis Hunter over Matthew Golden. So I would take the Jaguars over the Packers skill room. Looking at the Indianapolis Colts, he had them at number 16. They went up from 22 last year. I'm not really sure why, other than they added a rookie tight end who, I think Warren is a good player, and they obviously had the worst tight end room in the NFL last year. But I also don't think Tyler Warren is some kind of game-changing player at tight end. Much like running back, I think there's only a handful of those guys in the NFL at tight end. And I don't think Warren is one of those. So, Josh Downs is a solid slot receiver. To me, though, the gap between Michael Thomas and Michael Pittman is so great that it doesn't matter what the gap between Josh Downs and the Jags' number 2 receiver is. Next up, the Arizona Cardinals. This is an interesting one. Marvin Harrison Jr., I think, is a good player. Trey McBride's obviously a good player. James Conner's a better player. But still, having Brian Thomas Jr., he was much better than Marvin Harrison Jr. last year. He just was. And I think he still profiles better moving forward. I really like Marvin Harrison Jr. I think he's a good receiver. But I think Brian Thomas Jr. is a great receiver. And really, almost for that alone, otherwise they have Michael Wilson, Trey Benson, Greg Dortch. Just not a lot of guys who are, I think, all that impressive. The Houston Texans, a surprising one to me at number 14, especially considering Tank Dell, probably isn't playing. John Mechie really hasn't done much. I think Nico Collins is obviously a great receiver. I think him and Brian Thomas Jr. are close, but then Christian Kirk, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel. I project Travis Hunter to be better than all of them this year. And they have Joe Mixon and Nick Chubb in the backfield. Dalton Schultz at tight end. I probably give the Jaguars the edge at tight end. Running back, I think they're close. I think Joe Mixon is, just a couple years past his prime. Nick Chubb, obviously. The Washington Commanders, this was a little fascinating. Had them at number 13. Of course, Terry McLaurin's, a big player. They added Deebo Samuel, but I think Samuel is obviously, a little bit past his prime. Zach Ertz and Austin Eckler, I was fascinated that they had strong seasons last year. But I would take the Jaguars room over them. And again, this is, I think I had Brian Thomas Jr. over Terry McLaurin. And then looking at the rest of their room, I think the Jaguars have the advantage at tight end. I think the Jaguars have the advantage at running back. I think the Jaguars have the advantage at number 2 receiver. I would take Travis Hunter over Deebo. So that's where I have that. Number 12, the Kansas City Chiefs. This one I probably do lean the Chiefs. I know Kelsey isn't really Travis Kelsey anymore, but Rashee Rice, really good receiver. Obviously, Hollywood Brown is back. Xavier Worthy. I probably would give them the edge there. Dallas Cowboys, CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. I think the Jaguars are better at tight end and running back. Wide receivers close. I think you probably have to give the edge to the Cowboys just because they have 2 guys who have produced. But that is... I'd say Cowboys probably make sense in front of them. Miami Dolphins. I would take the Jaguars skill room over the Miami Dolphins. I think Tyreek's obviously declining. Jaden Waddle, it's really a question of can he be, to me, the number one target on things more than just kind of gimmick targets. Running back, they obviously have a very talented guy. Not a lot of depth there. Tight end, they traded for Darren Waller. I think that says it all. The Atlanta Falcons is a tough one. I like Kyle Pitts more than most. I would take Brian Thomas Jr. over Drake London. I probably, if you force me to say, would probably take the Darnell Mooney over De'Ami Brown. But I would take Travis Hunter, obviously over Darnell Mooney. But I would give the Falcons the edge at tight end and running back. Baltimore Ravens, I think the Jaguars have a much better receiver room. Ravens have a more balanced tight end room and a better running back room. So that one I get. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I think you just have to give to Tampa Bay. That one makes sense. Minnesota Vikings, Justin Jefferson's obviously elite. I'm not as much of a TJ Hawkinson guy as anybody else. Jordan Addison, though, has kind of proven himself as number 2 receiver. I'd give the edge there. Los Angeles Rams, obviously Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua, etc. San Francisco 49ers, I don't think so. I really don't. George Kittle is obviously still fantastic. We'll see what Christian McCaffrey looks like coming off injury. He did not look good last year. But otherwise, at a receiver, I mean, Juwan Jennings is a good player. But I'd probably take, I know he still hasn't played, but I'd probably take Travis Hunter over him as a number 2 receiver. Brandon Ayuk's been injured. You would take Brian Thomas over him regardless. And then Ricky Pearsall. I mean, who knows what he offers? Cincinnati Bengals, I mean, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, there's not much to talk about there. I mean, I don't think they have much at running back or tight end, but I don't really need to. Detroit Lions at 2 and Philadelphia Eagles at 1. Obviously you probably both take them, but I think just having Brian Thomas Jr. on there regardless should give the Jaguars reason to really up the ante on this list next year and potentially even crack the top 10. Thank you guys for listening to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. We'll be back next time.